The award ceremony had been nothing short of spectacular. Golden spotlights swept across the grand hall, reflecting off polished marble floors and dazzling crystal chandeliers. Every camera in the room had been aimed at the two men who, for years, had been the unspoken duo the entire entertainment industry couldn't stop speculating about: Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan. Their names had just been announced together for a special contribution award to the industry. The applause had been thunderous, rising like a wave that shook the walls. They walked up the stage side by side, their steps perfectly in sync, as if choreographed by fate itself. Yibo's usually expressionless face carried a faint smirk, while Xiao Zhan's smile, bright yet suspiciously soft, lingered longer than necessary whenever his eyes shifted toward Yibo. The moment that would soon set the internet ablaze happened in a fraction of a second, and it was completely unplanned. After the award presentation, the two stood before the microphones. Xiao Zhan gave his thanks first, his voice calm, but his eyes strangely alive, flickering with an emotion the audience couldn't quite decode. Yibo's turn followed, his tone short and clipped, as always. But what no one knew, what they weren't supposed to know, was that when the applause dimmed and the event host began to transition to the next segment, one microphone, hanging low between them, was still on. The sound technician had missed the mute button. And in that moment, Xiao Zhan leaned slightly toward Yibo, tilting his head so his lips were dangerously close to Yibo's ear. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You have no idea how hard it was not to grab your hand up here," Xiao Zhan murmured. The hall was filled with clinking glasses and scattered chatter, so most people missed it, but the live broadcast didn't. Somewhere, in living rooms and on smartphones, fans froze mid-breath as the soft sentence slipped through the speakers. The background noise drowned most of it, but the words were there, just enough to ignite a storm. Yibo's face didn't change, or at least, it didn't seem to. His eyes, however, flickered briefly, almost imperceptibly. He glanced at Xiao Zhan from the corner of his eye, lips twitching as though suppressing an answer that could burn the entire internet to the ground. But Xiao Zhan wasn't done. As they turned to exit the stage, the microphone still picked up fragments. "You looked too good tonight," Xiao Zhan's voice said, quiet but weighted, "and I hate that I can't say it out loud." Yibo's steps faltered for the briefest second. His hand, the one closest to Xiao Zhan, flexed open and closed before brushing ever so slightly against Xiao Zhan's. It wasn't a handhold. It wasn't even long enough to be called a touch. But in the world of trained observers and fans who had dissected every frame of their interactions for years, that brush of skin was a thunderclap. Backstage, where the audience's eyes couldn't follow, tension hung between them like a live wire. The low hum of air conditioners did little to soften the sound of Xiao Zhan's voice when he finally turned to face Yibo. "You didn't answer me," he said softly, though his smile looked as if he had just won another award. Yibo, still holding his trophy, tilted his head and replied, "If I did, you wouldn't be able to walk out of here without people knowing." The statement landed heavier than either of them intended. Xiao Zhan froze for a heartbeat, then chuckled, not because it was funny, but because that was his only defense against the growing heat in his chest. The crew members milling around them kept their heads down, pretending to be busy with cables and lighting rigs. But in the hushed, electric space between them, a conversation without words unfolded. Xiao Zhan's eyes searched Yibo's face, and Yibo, in his infuriating way, gave nothing except that tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth that Xiao Zhan had learned long ago was his version of a smile. Then came the real curveball. A stage assistant rushed up to inform them they had to do a quick behind-the-scenes interview for the live broadcast. Xiao Zhan and Yibo were ushered into a smaller room lined with gold drapes and soft lighting. A single camera faced them, and they were asked to sit close, too close. The host, trying to keep things light, asked them to share their thoughts about winning the award together. Xiao Zhan went first, playing the perfect public persona, but his hand was resting on his thigh, a hand Yibo's knee brushed against once, twice, deliberately this time. The contact was subtle, invisible to the camera's eye, but Xiao Zhan's voice betrayed a slight tremor mid-sentence. When it was Yibo's turn, he gave a minimal answer as usual, but right at the end, he glanced sideways at Xiao Zhan and said, "Some things are better kept offstage." Fans watching live didn't know whether to scream, faint, or start their rising immediately. Social media exploded in real time. Clips of the hot MIC moment began circulating within minutes, hashtags multiplying like wildfire. Back in the dressing room, Xiao Zhan leaned against the vanity mirror, still holding his trophy, watching Yibo shrug off his blazer. "You're reckless sometimes," Xiao Zhan said. "You whispered first," Yibo countered, his voice calm but edged with something deeper. "That MIC wasn't supposed to be on," Xiao Zhan sighed, though he didn't sound regretful. If anything, there was a dangerous glint in his eyes. "Maybe it's better this way." Yibo stopped mid-motion, turning to face him fully. "Better? Maybe people should know," Xiao Zhan said, his tone unreadable. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending." For a long moment, Yibo didn't reply. The silence was thick enough to feel, stretching until Xiao Zhan began to look away. Then Yibo stepped closer, close enough for his voice to be a low, private thread between them. "If you're going to start something," Yibo said, "make sure you can finish it." The air between them snapped taut, as though the rest of the world had dropped away. Xiao Zhan's lips curved into the kind of smile that could start wars. Outside, the award show continued, oblivious to the storm brewing behind closed doors. The world had only caught a few seconds of whispered words, but those seconds had cracked the surface of something both of them had spent years keeping hidden. The microphone might have been switched off now, but for Wang Yibo and Xiao Zhan, the damage, or perhaps the magic, was already done. And for the millions of fans replaying the clip, dissecting every pixel of their expressions, one truth became impossible to ignore. Sometimes, the most dangerous confessions are the ones you're not supposed to hear. The golden applause was still echoing when Xiao Zhan adjusted the award in his hand, the weight of it cold and smooth against his palm. The air under the blinding spotlights felt thin, charged, almost electric. Yibo was standing to his right, shoulders squared, his trophy angled slightly away from the cameras. The host had just thanked the audience, ready to move on. The background chatter was rising again, a wall of clinking glasses and murmured congratulations. That should have been the moment they relaxed. That should have been the moment they let the applause fade into just another memory. But fate had other plans. The slim, silver microphone standing between them, the one lowered to accommodate both their heights, still had its red light glowing faintly. Still live. Still listening. Xiao Zhan didn't notice it at first. He was too caught up in the sheer, dangerous proximity of Yibo's presence, the faint scent of cologne laced with something warm, the slow rhythm of his breathing. The applause was still roaring in his ears, but it wasn't the crowd he was hearing. It was the pounding in his own chest. And then, without warning, the words slipped out. "You have no idea how hard it was not to grab your hand up here," Xiao Zhan murmured, his head tilting ever so slightly toward Yibo's ear. His lips barely moved, but his voice, low and warm, hummed through the microphone, just loud enough for the feed to catch. Somewhere, out there in the vast ocean of livestream viewers, someone froze mid-scroll. Another's jaw dropped. 1,000 pairs of eyes blinked in disbelief. And before anyone could process it, he spoke again. "You looked too good tonight," he whispered, and this time there was a hitch in his breath, as though even he realized he'd crossed an invisible line. "I hate that I can't say it out loud." Yibo's reaction was almost imperceptible, but to those who knew him, it was seismic. His left eyebrow twitched, a tell fans knew all too well meant he'd been caught off guard. His grip on the trophy tightened. And then, the smallest, quickest glance in Xiao Zhan's direction. It wasn't just a glance, it was a pulse of recognition, of awareness, of something unspoken that seemed to stretch between them like a silver thread. The audience in the hall didn't hear it. The band was playing softly in the background, filling the air with harmless melodies. But in living rooms across the country, fans were already leaning toward their screens, replaying, lips silently forming the words they thought they heard. The two men began to step off the stage, but the microphone, still live, caught the faintest sound, a breath, a small exhale that might have been a laugh or something heavier. And then, it caught something else. A sound that was not quite a word, the faintest brush of skin on fabric. Yibo's hand, as they descended the short flight of stairs, swung just wide enough to graze Xiao Zhan's. It wasn't a hold, wasn't a grab, but it lingered for a heartbeat longer than any accident should. Xiao Zhan's steps faltered. Only slightly. Only enough for him to adjust his award to his left hand, freeing the right, just in case. From the corner of his eye, he caught the curve of Yibo's lips. It wasn't a smile. Not really. But it was something. The kind of something that could keep him awake for nights, replaying it like a scene in a film. The lights from the stage bathed them in gold, making the faint lines of tension in their posture look almost deliberate, like two actors locked in a scene too intimate to break. And in the control room backstage, a frantic voice was asking, "Who left MIC2 on?" The world wouldn't know until later just how much those few seconds would matter. But for the viewers catching it live, the moment already felt different, heavy, loaded, the kind of slip that rewrites entire stories. Yibo's voice, when it finally came, was quiet enough that if not for that cursed glowing red light, it would have disappeared into the noise. "Careful, Zhan, he murmured, a single, measured sentence. "Some things aren't meant for this room." The words landed like a dare. Xiao Zhan's head tilted, not toward him this time, but just enough to let the corners of his lips lift. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't even a retreat. And the microphone, faithful, merciless, caught it all. By the time they reached the wings of the stage, the sound technician had finally hit the mute button. The red light died. But it was too late. The whispers had already escaped. The internet would never give them back. Somewhere out there, tens of thousands of viewers were clipping the moment, slowing it down frame by frame, reading lips, amplifying audio. Theories were already being typed. Headlines were already forming. The two men stepped into the shadows behind the curtains, the echo of their steps swallowed by thick velvet. But the moment, that hot MIC confession, would go on living long after the night ended. And for everyone who heard it, it wasn't just a mistake. It was proof. Drop your thoughts in the comments, we're reading them all. Like if you loved it. Share this with every Yibo Zhan fan you know. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next jaw-dropping reveal.